Hi, my name is Abraham. This is the first official podcast episode, and I'm here with.
I'm Jeremy Arias. I'm from Art Block Zine, a part of DSTL Arts.
Today we have.
Hello, everybody. My name is Funaki, and I am a photographer based here out of Los Angeles.
Welcome.
Thank you.
This turns out great because we have. This is new, right? Are you nervous, mate? Or you're?
No, I'm good.
Good. See, that's the spirit, man.
Yes.
So we have a couple of questions, right?
Yeah.
You want to start?
Yeah. So we did an interview with Funaki here for Art Block Zine, and we already have a little bit of questions out of the way that we have in print, but just to get something kind of for our watchers and our listeners, little promo here. Do you mind telling us a little bit about your photography, where you started, how you came to be who you are today?
Sure, no problem. Well, I've been shooting consistently now for the better part of about 31 years. I started in 1990, and the way I started was just shooting my friends. I was in high school, and I was just wanting to kind of document our daily activities, being teenagers. And I just kind of would carry a little camera that my mom had laying around the house, and little by little, I just kept on documenting what was happening. And it was nothing, I had no artistic aspiration with it. It was just basically just going to parties or going to shows or hanging out with I was on a swimming team, so hanging out with the guys on the swimming team and stuff like that. So that's how it started. The type of photography that I do now is a little bit of a mix. It's a mix of music photography, and when I'm not doing music, I do I guess it would be, I don't want to say it's called street photography, because street photography is a lot more where you're like capturing random moments quickly. I think I kind of can label it more as street portraiture, because I actually stop people and I talk with them and we engage in conversation, and the final act of the conversation or interaction is to do a couple of pictures.
Interesting.
So I think I could describe it. That could be best described that way.
Since you were talking about this specific type of style that you do on like portrait street photography, do you have any piece from there that's kind of favorite, that you have a story behind it, and maybe in the post-production we can post the photo that you're talking about if you let us permission to post it and talk about it? Do you have any of these photos in mind?
Well, I did submit a photo of, I call it Clowny.
Clowny.
And it's a picture of a young guy, and if you see his face, it's kind of tattooed as like a clown, and it's not done well.
Oh. Okay.
And the way that I met this gentleman was, I was working in Lincoln Heights at the time, and then after work I would always walk around maybe for about an hour before I'd go home and maybe get something to eat or get something to drink, and I'd walk around and take pictures. And I met this guy right outside the Jack in the Box, and I guess, how would I say it? I guess like he was talking to himself. He was kind of moving around, and I would see, what I noticed, that everybody who would come out of the Jack in the Box would immediately go this way, avoid him, if they were scared or whatnot. And that's one of the things that I do in my photography, is that I engage people. And I said, well, let's see what happens. So I engaged him. I, said hello to him, and as soon as I said hello, whatever he was doing, he stopped. Okay. And said hello back. And we started talking, and he told me a little bit about himself and, where he grew up and how he ended up where he was at the time. And we did a couple of sessions right there on the street, and I know that he couldn't stay still for very long. The sessions would last about a minute, 2 minutes, because then after that I couldn't really understand what he was saying. Okay. But the final one, when I was going to say, okay, let's meet one more time next week to do a couple of pictures, I found out that he passed.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so he passed. So in what I hear that it wasn't, maybe a little bit violent.
Yeah.
The passing. So that's one of the pictures that has stood out to me the most.
I'm glad
Because I was able to make a friend.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned this specific event, because I have a question that kind of relates to it, and it's how does art or photography, in your case, right, has changed in the way you interact with people in general?
Oh, I mean, like I was telling Jeremy during our other interview, is by nature I'm a very introverted person. I'm not like this wild dude.
Yeah.
And it's like, life of the party and cracking modelos and all that type of stuff. I'm like the complete opposite. But when I'm taking photos, that's kind of like my excuse to be able to engage and talk and be more of an extrovert, because that's kind of my excuse to be able to get out there. If not, I'd just be sitting around doing nothing. So it's kind of like my way of kind of getting out there and meeting people. And I like to meet people that are going to be photographically interesting. I mean, I'll be honest with that. Whether if they look a certain way, if they're wearing something, or just their own personality stands out.
Yeah.
Something has to interest me.
I find that because I also do photography, and I found that it's a lot of cases on people who do photography. The camera becomes their outlet or their link to a social life that's different than the previous one they have. And I think it's a fun part about art, right? It has that connection to us with the world, right? So that's really interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, so it's very, if it wasn't for the camera, I would just be, I don't know, watching TV or something. So that's my outlet.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older, it's helped me even more.
Definitely.
So like you say it's your outlet, like for that, do you have any like special techniques that you like to practice when practicing your art?
I'm actually a very non-technical guy. I'm actually surprised I was able to log on to Google Meet right now. So I'm very low. Even my photography is low budget. Even when I'm working with musicians, there's no special production where there's like an assistant walking around and catering, and none of that. It's just me. It's with my camera, and sometimes it's just like with something like this, or it could look something as cheap as this, and the artist, and we find a nice location and we talk and we take our time, and then we slowly build as we shoot for what it is they want to use the pictures for, so it's very, very low budget. It's still, it's low budget. I'll be honest. It's low budget. I don't know. There's no big fancy production that goes to it. Yes.
Yeah, I had a classmate who did that concert photography, and
yes,
I have been to concerts, of course, like rock and all that stuff, right? But it's hard because the lighting is really low, right? So it's a particular way of shooting, and you already kind of explained the cameras you have. We have Canon, Sony, Olympus, Leica, and a lot of them, right? But how, besides the camera, how do you find the technology of photography and the way you shoot? You kind of already went into it. How do you find that, like, a link or the way you style your photography with the stuff that you have, with the cameras that you have?
Well, I guess, like I've heard before, and I could identify with it, is that the camera is just basically the tool to take the picture, and it's what you do with it. And then there's some cameras that you need maybe a little bit more to have more control when you're doing like shooting at a show or something like that. But even if you just have something that's not so expensive and you know how to use that camera correctly, you could definitely capture moments and capture scenes and stuff like that of what it is that you're trying to shoot. So it's just a tool. Any camera will do. It might not come out the best, but as long as you kind of you could see it and you can kind of prepare for it. And the more shows you go to, the better you get. and I've been to a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's not that I'm saying that it's easy, but it definitely starts becoming a little bit more easier to do.
Yeah.
So, and I've been run into situations where I have a nice digital camera ready to go, and all of a sudden, for some reason, it's just not working.
Yeah.
And I go back to a simpler one, and I'm able to get some decent shots.
Well, it does have to be with the equipment. You kind of adjust your style, or the style comes to you. You know, I went to this lecture on how to do plate photography, which is huge old school photographs, right? They have super high detail because this works kind of a molecular level, because it's the chemicals that are working, not like digitally we have pixels and stuff like that. But it takes a while to set them up, and the style this guy was using, it was definitely allowed just by the style of photography, because he was going for the system, you know, they putting your plates, taking the time, and also it's slow photography, so most of them are landscapes, right? So it definitely the type of camera, or it kind of helps or guides your style, you know. So that's good that you mentioned that.
Yes, and like what you're talking about, it's kind of like it's a large format type of photography.
Yes.
It's a very slow process to set up, you know, your timing, your exposure. You put the cloth on to make sure that because everything is in those big 8x10 cameras, it's upside down.
Yes.
And you know, it's like so you kind of have to like turn your head a little bit, because everything is backwards and upside down. So it's definitely a skill, and that 8x10 photography or large format is not easy to do.
Yeah.
Definitely not easy to do. Yes.
But it definitely changes the style you shoot. So that
exactly.
I like what you say. Like, I already try other cameras, but the cameras that I'm using are the ones that work for me. You know.
Yes.
Again, it's about this relationship with the tools and the artist, right? And how you perform or you express yourself with that. So that's pretty neat.
And I've always traveled light. I like to photograph light. Like just you know, one or two cameras, one preferably, one lens, and then we make it work with that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes.
I like the idea of keeping it like minimalist and simple, because then it shows like novices and beginners that pretty much anyone can do this. You know, it's just that it takes time and practice to come to you. So I kind of like the idea that, you know, keeping it basic, you can still make such nice pieces. You know,
and even I like to consider that the photos that I do are still almost novice looking. You know, that's not it's not like, you know, we were saying before, it's not high tech or anything like that. So a lot of bands I'm like the type of photographer that a lot of bands that are just starting out look for. And most of them will outgrow me once they get a little bit more more known, or if, you know, they kind of need more of a higher end type of photographer.
Well, it's just also about the style, right? And, for example, I always tell, like, I have done classes for photography, like teach them. And one of the things that I tell the students, it's not about the camera, like, the best camera is the one you have at hand, right? Like, if you miss it, like, that's a cool thing about having small cameras. Not that I do it, because I have a huge backpack, man. but it's always good to, like, try with I tell them, the best exercise is try to take a photo with your phone. Well, nowadays, phones are getting way better, but, like, because it's about the moment on how you take it. So that's kind of a good exercise, you know? It's whatever you have, and your vision and the way you shoot, that's what actually makes photography. You know,
exactly.
The equipment, you know?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And, you know, what you have and what you do with it is more important. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to go like DSTL Arts. Their mission objective is to hire, inspire, and teach artists from underserved communities around LA. So I like to ask questions kind of around those lines. So just kind of want to ask, like, what skills have helped you turn your art into a career? Like, I noticed you mentioned that you like to work for smaller bands. Like, how is it that you acquire these, like, jobs or, you know, these little gigs here and there?
Well, I've been working with a record label here based out of Los Angeles called Wild Records. They've been around since 2001, so they celebrated their 20-year anniversary. I first came in contact with Wild Records around 2006 during, like, the MySpace days.
Okay.
And it was just by accident. It was by accident. If you guys remember MySpace, when you would click on a page, there was a profile song for bands. Like, you would click on their page and a song would pop up and you could hear. And so the first band I heard was a band called the Vargas Brothers, and they sounded, what caught my attention is that they looked nothing like they sounded.
Huh.
So that's what caught my attention. And as I kind of started hearing more, I kind of found out about this record, Wild Records. And the way I started working with them is just going to the shows and shooting and meeting them. And it wasn't until I was working with a magazine called LA Record Magazine. It's an independent music magazine based out of LA, that I started working with a lot of bands that were just coming up. And they were being photographed for the first time artistically, trying to do something artistically for their music. And so that's how I kind of started, is doing that. Is, as a band would come up into the scene, I would kind of be one of the first ones, or just being signed to the label, I would be one of the first one to photograph them for any type of promotion, or 45s or vinyl or CD or whatever they were going to put their music out on. And so I kind of like that. I kind of like working with bands that are still kind of nervous. They don't know what's going on. They're kind of, they're excited, rather than the bands who've kind of like, they're a little bit more seasoned. Yeah. And they know the lighting, and they know, they start art directing the art director, so so that's why I like working with a lot of younger bands, because that's just the way the style is. And I kind of like seeing bands grow as you maybe inexperienced young musicians, and just watching them as they progress.
That's interesting.
Yes.
So now that you mentioned, because I didn't notice that, how do you connect yourself with photography and music? Have you seen any connection?
Well, music has always been something that has had my attention ever since I was, maybe, I think the earliest memories I could probably have is maybe about 10 or 11. Because I come from a mixed background. Yeah. My dad's Japanese and my mother's Mexican. And so I kind of grew up, the playlist or the albums on the music for those were, very different. So as I was coming up, junior high school, that's when I kind of first heard the Beatles. That's when I first heard the Beastie Boys. Run DMC.
What's that?
I had a paper route, if you guys know what that is.
I don't know what a paper is. I don't know what a paper is.
I had a paper route.
I wasn't born yet.
And during my paper route, I had a Walkman. And that was a Walkman that actually had the radio on it too, not just cassette, but it had a radio on it.
Man. It was like a yellow one? It was the yellow one? The squirrel one? Oh my God.
It was an Iowa. Yeah. And so the classical and the jazz station were one of the only ones that came on clear. So that's how I...
It's because yeah, that's a wider range, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I started listening. That's how I got into jazz and classical. Yeah. And when I would go to the record store, I wouldn't just go to the rock or to hip hop or whatever. I would kind of go to every corner.
That's awesome.
And so I always like to look at the artwork and the liner notes. That's what I've always been interested in. And I kind of started getting photography jobs in music as everything was kind of changing from analog into digital. And that was a difficult transition.
Yes, it is.
It was a lot of difficult transition, because that's where I was getting a lot of rejection letters, because there was no longer a need for LPs, no longer a need for CDs. Everyone was starting to do the illegal downloading at the time. And then I had spent all this money on analog equipment, and that was all junk now. Everybody was starting to get into digital. I was like, I just finished paying for all this stuff. Yeah, man. So for me, it's always been a connection, because I just, the album cover is, I was maybe one of the last of the generations where I could still sit there and listen to an album and look at the album cover. Yeah. And I still enjoy that to this very day. So to me, photography is important as the music I was listening to. And I came up, as I was coming up in high school, I came up through grunge.
Yes.
So the music, a lot of the bands that I shoot now are kind of in the rockabilly scene. Yeah. There's rockabilly. A lot of them are influenced by first wave punk, northern soul, stuff like that. But I came up in the grunge era.
But you definitely have a nice niche there, because those are the bands who didn't immediately just went digital or high production, because they all underground and they do their small scene, right? So that's perfect that you were there for that kind of specific photography.
Exactly. And it was perfect. It fit perfect. And even to this day, Wild Records still puts out 45 vinyls in CDs as well. So it's been a perfect fit. I've been with them now for 11 years, I'm sorry. And it's been a great ride working with them. They were the owner of the label Reb Kennedy. He signed one of the probably most infamous rockabilly groups that would come out of LA, and that was Little Luis y los Wild Teens.
Great stuff, man. I'm getting a playlist already from you. Hardship after often prepares ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. This is a quote from C.S. Lewis. But just because I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to an up-and-coming artist such as yourself when you were younger?
I would just say, do not give up, because there's going to be that downtime. There's going to be the time where nobody cares about anything that you're doing. And it's nice to be here today, like with you guys, and discussing photography and discussing music and stuff like that. But there was a period of time where, there was just rejection letter after rejection letter. No, it's not what we're looking for. It's not what the style's not what really we need right now. And that's the time when it's easy to give up. You're like, well, what am I doing this for then? But that's the time where you really have to shoot more and get more motivated and continue and press forward during those times when nobody wants to look at it. You're looking at it, it sucks, and it's like you're not connecting with anybody. Everyone's telling you no. And so that's, to me, that's the biggest thing, is to tell young kids is to not give up. And then don't do it for the likes and for the, all the stuff like that, because all that stuff is irrelevant. It's not important. It's nice, but it's not important. The important is that you continue making art and you press forward and you keep growing as an artist. And in the end, you'll see results. Okay.
A bodybuilder will go to the market and see the products in a different way, right? Or a composer will go into the movies and instead of talking about the plot of the movie to his friend or her friend, the composer will talk about the film score, like sound, style, rhythm. So having this in mind, how do you see photography changing the way you view things in life?
Well, for me, I've always had like a third eye.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like a third eye that I have, and it's I always see things. And ever since I was a little kid, I've seen things that most people don't notice or just kind of walk by. I kind of notice little details in things. And I've always been like that since I was a little kid. So, like I was telling Jeremy before in our other interview, it was kind of like I took it was a group of pictures that I took, and we named that whole series. It was called Casimiro. Remember that, Jeremy?
Yeah,
Casimiro. And it was, and it was like it was a term that was given to me like in the late 90s from some people that I knew, and they were making fun of me. They were trying to clown me.
Yeah.
And because of my Japanese eyes, so they nicknamed me Casimiro.
Yeah.
And to me it was always kind of ironic, because it's like, can barely see, but yet to me I see sometimes more than what maybe the average person
kind of
might
irony,
see. Little
right?
Details. Yeah. And they would play that song from Mi Banda El Mexicano. Remember Casimiro? it was a band.
Can you sing it for us, please?
Oh man, I totally remember.
Oh, no. 1, 2, 3. No, just kidding. So I mean, in that sense, I've always been able to notice little details, and I try to convey that in photography when I'm shooting out in the streets. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's definitely something that's always been there for me.
Because I always notice, especially the beginner classes for photography, when the students start to see things like in the photographer's way, right? They start looking at light. they're still looking at time as well, right? Because of the medium, right? The medium calls for you to be alert to these things. So either music, you will do the same thing, right? So it's always fascinating to me to see that moment when the artist sees like, oh, look at this light, or like this composer, right? Like, oh, do you hear that? Just because you were more aware of it, more in tune, you kind of, like you say, you have a third eye, right? That's kind of how I see it. It's always interesting to me to see it when it happens, you know? Like, oh my God, look at that.
Exactly. Just like musicians, like when, I mean, I'm not a musician, but musicians hear a certain way.
Yes.
Right? You know, painters, they, you know, their movements of their hands are a certain way. Same thing with photographers, you know, we see, and especially, sometimes I see stuff and I don't have my camera, and I'm like,
Don't you have that moment where you're thinking, like, wish I had a camera in my eye? Like,
exactly.
You're ready.
And it's happened many a times, and I usually always have it with me, but of course it's the time that I don't is when I see something, you know? It's like,
But I guess you save it in your memory, right?
Yes.
We kind of brushed up on the past, what brought you up in terms of being an artist in the present. Do you have any plans for the future of your art? Anything you plan to do? Any goals you're looking forward to?
Just continue shooting. I like... For me, my favorite ways of seeing the pictures that I take are on a wall or in print. On social media is not, I mean, they look nice, but that's not the way, at least I feel that they should be seen. They're more appreciated in person or in print. So then that way the viewer you can really go in up close and see the detail.
Yes.
The other day I was it was an exhibition at Hotel Bel Air, and it closed last Sunday. And it was some photos of Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, yeah.
And it was from a photographer named Bert Stern. And what makes those pictures a little bit special was the last time she was photographed before she died.
Oh, okay.
And so when I was there, those prints were made huge. They were probably like 48 something by 50 something prints. So you're able to get up close. And really see the details of her hands, of her facial features, of her expressions and stuff like that. So I think that's the way the pictures should be seen, kind of big, and so that way you can really get into the details. Like the picture that we did of Clowny.
Yeah.
You know, the one like that. Yeah. Let me see if to me.
Oh, yeah.
This is the way it should be seen.
Yes, definitely.
So once you get up to him close, because most people, I told you when I was shooting him, most people ran away from him.
Yes.
And maybe for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But, you know, I decided to talk to him, and we actually became friends.
Yes.
You know? And so now, instead of running away from Clowny, you could go up there and see a little bit of hurt in his eyes. You could probably see here where he was scratching himself. Maybe he was, you know, maybe he had... I never asked him if he had any problems with addiction, but, you know, I don't know, maybe he did. And then you can see his thing, he had like a trach, like, looks like they drilled a hole, or, you know, when you...
for the smokers?
Okay. Yeah. So it looks like they put a hole in his neck. That you can go up there and actually read what it says and look at him up close. So to me, that's the best way to see it.
Yeah.
That's the best way to see the picture. So then that way you could appreciate it and ask questions and maybe know a little bit more about his story.
Yeah, definitely. I have seen that it has its benefit and its downplays as well, like the social media, because it definitely makes photography more accessible.
Yes.
Because more people see it and everything. But there's something about going to a place, and especially spending more time, because I know you're just flicking in like your phone really fast, and you don't have the time to absorb the picture and take the time and analyze it, and that's the best way to absorb any art, right? Having the time and give it its space, right? And yeah, I love print, man. I definitely love like large format photos because of that, right? But it's funny that you mentioned it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's the best way to look at them. And then also I love looking at them in print. That's why when I get the magazine, DSTL Arts, and I look at it, and to see it in print, it's like, that's awesome.
Right.
And knowing that other people are going to be able to enjoy it, and through that, I've been able to talk to other artists that are also featured in the magazine and make connections that way, because I love checking out other people's art. I love looking at other people's photography. I love asking other people questions of what their technique are, or what they saw, because once you put a picture out there, I mean, I've gotten a lot of people have gotten upset at me as well, because my intentions when I take a picture are always good. My intentions are never to ridicule or to belittle or to put anyone down in any way. But when you put a picture out there, it's for the world now, and the world is going to make their own interpretation or come up with their own story of what they think it is. And so that's something that you really can't control. I know that when I did it, it came from here.
Yes.
But what else, once you put it out there, you get all sorts of different reactions, and that's okay, that you get different reactions, because you start seeing different people's perspectives of what they are feeling or what they do when they see a photograph.
Yeah, but I like your approach, because you go and talk to the person.
Yes.
And also have this conversation and ask for the permission of taking the photo. I'm in the class of taking photos from far just to make things more natural, but the process that you're doing, especially with this kind of people people may think you're abusing them, it's better because you're actually approaching them and asking for permission, right? And also, like you were saying, people will not get close to this person, and the only way these type of people who are afraid to go there and see this person and talk to this person is through your photography, and that's part of art. It gives access to people, to feelings or people or landscapes that they might not have access to. And that's why I love your approach, man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, and it's and some people say no. Sometimes I have conversations with some really great people, and at the end they're like, you know what, maybe it's not a good idea, and that's fine. You respect their decision. And like you said, you photograph them mentally in your eyes, and you remember it that way. Usually, I'll take some notes when I get home, and I'll write down, so then I don't forget.
Yes.
So I don't forget them. So, but it's a powerful tool, definitely.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
I like kind of that you had the big print of Clowny out, and you were able to describe little details that I know people wouldn't go up and look at them with.
Yes.
And I feel like it really helps give people a second chance to not judge others, at least on print.
Exactly.
Because the print is just so much more passive than seeing the person, going through what they're going through in the moment. So it really gives a second chance to look at each other different.
Exactly. And look at him as a person, who he is or he was, he was a human. And he had, I'm sure he had a family. He was someone's son. He was someone's brother. He was someone's, cousin or something like that. And at least I know that I was able to converse with them and have, maybe ask them a few questions. Not going too deep, of course, but being able to interact with them, and and have that conversation with him. And it was, in the end, he was just a guy. But his situation at the time was maybe not the best, but he was a human just like all of us. And I'm glad I was able to capture his legacy and capture him on film.
Yeah, it definitely takes people like you to make the rest of us see things. Like you were saying, people might call me that I'm a little blind or that I don't see things, but in reality you're seeing things they don't. And I think it's the case, even if somebody's blind, don't take that for granted, because they have other ways of seeing things. Right?
Exactly. So they actually probably have more. Their sensories are probably even better than someone who can see.
Perfect. Yeah. Also, we're going to like the end of this first episode, so I'm gonna leave one last question for here, just because I like pushing people. Alright. So this is the last question. Have any ready?
We talked about past, future. We already got advice too. Do you have any final words before we go? Anything you'd like to say that maybe we didn't ask or brush up on?
First of all, thank you again for having me. It's always really cool to when people show a little bit of interest in your work and you're able to talk about it and converse with it and share it with other people.
Yes.
And I'm excited to see what other artists you guys are going to feature on the podcast as well, so I could check them out. If I don't know their work, then I could discover new work. But I think I would like to just say to keep shooting, have fun. Don't take it too seriously. In the end, it's just photography. But definitely have fun with it, and I hope to continue participating or having more pictures in the magazine, and being able to see what other people are contributing as well.
Nice.
Thank you. Was a pleasure.
Yeah. Real quick.
Thank you so much. A pleasure.
Real quick before we go, just wanted to give our listeners and yourself the chance to kind of promote yourself. Where could we find more of your work available?
All of my music work is at wildrecordsusa.com. That's where I do most of my music photography. Some of the best rock and roll based here out of LA. There's also a documentary that was made on the label back in 2013 called Los Wild Ones, and it is available, I believe, on Amazon Prime. And you can see the trailer on YouTube as well. And if anybody wants to follow some of the work that I do, same thing with street portraiture and with Wild Records, it's wildrecords_photo.
Yeah, I've been checking your stuff, man. Pretty cool stuff.
Thank you.
So for all our listeners and viewers, go check his stuff. It's pretty good. And you see,
thank you
he's
guys.
a pretty
I appreciate
cool guy,
it.
approachable. So cool.
All right. Thank you for your time. It was great having you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.